Good morning and welcome to Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and anything else called with a P. Anyway, good morning. Hope you're having a great morning this morning. This is the host of Viewpoint, that program which comes on every Wednesday morning, 8:15 to 0900 hours. And our associate producer here, glad to have him with us again today, Mr. Lloyd Kirby. How are you this morning, Mr. Kirby?
Not too bad. And yourself?
Well, obviously not very well this morning. I have got tongue-tied already before we even get started. As you remember, both of you listeners out there, that we always try to do a little kudo or two each Wednesday morning from Viewpoint. And I got thinking driving up here, this summer started here, and this is a summer solstice, come to think about it. First official day of summer. And our park district performs a really good service for our community. And there's a lot of people have to do a lot of planning out there. So kudos and thank yous to those at the Park District who make summer shorter for our kids. Mm-hmm. Very simply and very sweet.
Yeah, they have lots of programming. They, of course, have the Aquatic Center, the 4th of July celebration coming up. So always something happening out there.
Well, just like here in Atlanta, there's always something good things happening. And I will turn over the introduction of our guest this morning to an expert. Go right ahead, Lloyd.
Oh, you're talking about me? Well, I don't know if I'm an expert. I was told once an X is a has-been and a spurt is a drip under pressure, so not sure how that works out. But anyway, Scott McCoy, the tourism director from Atlanta, is our guest today. And Mr. McCoy, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's great to be here.
Well, bright young fellow. I'm jealous as I can be. He's a good-looking kid, and he's got me on both counts, good-looking, and he's a kid. So
you might have a year or two on him, though.
Well, I'm very impressed by Scott. Scott, let me ask you a question. We're talking about tourism and museums and so forth. Originally, I think it was the original museum upstairs above the restaurant there.
Yes.
And is that still the location for the museum?
That wasn't me, but it did sound like me. That was a great voice.
Something come in?
No, you're okay.
Well, the jury's out on that. So let's go back to the original museum. Is that still the location of it?
Yes, it is still there. It's in Union Hall.
Very modest, but it's a very nice museum for this small community.
It is. It is really nice, very well kept, and a lot of really neat artifacts. So that's basically like the history museum for Atlanta. Has the old school, artifacts and different things, and it's a great asset to this small community to keep their history alive, and they've done a really nice job with that. And that's actually owned and run by the library.
Yes, I remember that now.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, tell me about tourism. Is there anything going on in Atlanta besides kids coming off the school bus and taking?
No, there's absolutely nothing. So it's great talking with you guys. Obviously.
Besides taking pictures of Paul Bunyan.
It's not Paul Bunyan, by the way, and that's actually one of the biggest kind of things we're trying to correct.
Oh, seriously?
It's not Paul Bunyan. It's not Tall Paul, or any of that.
Pay
It's
attention,
actually
folks.
So I'll explain that here in a second. After the tourism question, we've been talking for like an hour, so I feel like I know you guys anyway. So this is great. The tourist season really begins in May. And, starts before that, but ramps up and really hits in May because Atlanta sits on Route 66, just like Lincoln and Bloomington, Normal, Pontiac, and so forth. So with tourism's focus of Atlanta being on Route 66, that's where we've taken it and where we're going with it. And it's just been packed this year already with COVID ending and people getting back out and international flights and travel coming back and people getting out in the and even with gas prices and different things, it's always there's a cat in here. Mm-hmm. You didn't tell me there was somebody else listening. This cat rolls up. How much does he get paid?
That's Mabel.
Mabel. Hey, Mabel. So Atlanta is really one of these communities that has taken on tourism in a serious way, and I'm a tourism person and pretty aggressive with it, coming from Pontiac and being part of all the Route 66 stuff that was developed there basically for tourism in Pontiac. It's exciting to be in Atlanta. So that's really where tourism is, and we're gearing up for it with the new museum, which I'm sure we'll talk about here in a second. But let's go back to Paul Bunyan, quote unquote. It's kind of a misnomer because a lot of people consider Paul Bunyan to be one of these statues, and there is a Paul Bunyan statue. These are called muffler men, or in general giants, okay? And you see them up and down Route 66 and all over America. And their hands are situated where the right hand kind of cups up and the left hand cups down because they used to hold a muffler. So they were called muffler men originally. People would remove those. It would be bought out from a muffler shop or whatever, go to a restaurant, then they would put a flag or something else. And then International Fiberglass also made the Paul Bunyan, which would hold an axe in the same kind of a manner.
Mabel, you're paying attention to this. This is very important.
Yeah, she's over here just kind of staring at me and looking around, so I should have brought some treats in. So a lot of people will call it Paul Bunyan because its name is the Bunyan Giant. But it's Bunyan with an O, not an A, like Paul Bunyan.
Attention, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's because it came from a hot dog stand, Bunyan's hot dog stand in Cicero originally. So they named him the Bunyan with an O, Giant, and that's its name. But that's a common thing for people to call it Tall Paul or Paul Bunyan or whatever, but it's actually not, and it never has been.
I'm deferring to my partner.
Okay.
Oh, I think I floored everybody.
Yeah, how about that?
We don't allow dead air.
Yeah, it's way too early for us to have learned something. So how long have you been on the job as tourism director?
Almost a month and a half.
Okay.
So we got started when the position came up, and they talked to me, and it was basically at the beginning of the season. So I've played a lot of catch up from the previous directors, notes and everything, and getting caught up on Atlanta. Now, I knew Atlanta pretty well, being on 66, and I'm involved in that, knew people in Atlanta and so forth. So the catch-up process was interesting to see everything in the background of what was happening and where they want to go and what they want to do, and working with the city council and the Betterment Fund and everybody else. It was really exciting.
In the old days, I used to like to stop in when the restaurant was a going thing, and I like to stop in there, and I always took time, had a register for visitors to sign in. And I want to tell you, Atlanta, Illinois is known the world over.
It is.
Seriously, Lloyd, I was amazed that and most of the Europeans came from the eastern part of Europe, as opposed to back towards the English Channel. And I was just amazed at the number of people from foreign lands who have stopped and registered and signed a register there. I found it very entertaining.
It's very interesting when you think about it. And even a lot of locals don't realize this because they're not in the downtown area. They're at home having dinner at the ball game with their kids and so forth. But little Atlanta, Illinois, sees several hundred people a day just normally. And that's not even a big tour group coming in or something that's scheduled. And just sitting there, so I would sit and take counts and take averages. And the foreign traveler, met a couple, real nice younger girls from France the other day that just happened to stop by.
I'm starting to get interested, Lloyd.
It's really one of those things that unless you're involved with it, it's almost hard to see. Mm-hmm. We had the same situation in Pontiac, where Pontiac had no tourism to speak of prior to Route 66 and really kind of starting to build stuff up there. So a lot of us didn't understand it, and we had to sort of learn that and build things for it. And Atlanta is one of those communities that's doing that. A lot of communities miss it. They sit on 66, or they have some kind of great tourism draw to become a destination, and they don't take advantage of it. What I've always told people is really interesting. Route 66 is unlike any other kind of tourism out there because we're a linear community of about 2,500 miles. And what California does affects us. And what we do affects, every other state, all the states.
Tell me what the governor does out there doesn't affect us.
Well, that's a whole other story that we can get into, and even hours.
We have to shut the dial off at 9 o'clock, so we won't go there.
Oh, yeah, put the kids away, folks. We're gonna get into politics now. But yeah, I mean, but we're a big community, so we all work together, and what we do helps each other. And when somebody says, "Oh, I'm going to come over to Route 66 and do, experience Americana and see what America's like," and they pick Route 66, which is one of the biggest things to do for foreign travelers. We all work together all the way up and down the route, whether you're a small community like Atlanta or you're a large community like Albuquerque. And we work together as one big team. It's just an interesting dynamic, unlike any other type of tourism in the world.
Scott, golfing is not necessarily a tourism factor at all, but how many communities like the city of Atlanta have a nice golf course like North Greens?
Oh, yeah.
It's just lovely.
It is a really
quite
nice,
decent golf course.
Yes, very well kept, very well maintained.
Managed same way.
It is, well, yes, and that is a municipal course. So the city took that over several years ago, improved it. They just purchased recently the new carts, and for a 9-hole small town type of golf course, it ranks right up there. Now, I'll give you an interesting story, and even some of the city council doesn't even know this, because I haven't gotten to the point of putting this together in a format. But it's coming in as tourism director. While it's not necessarily a tourism function, it's basically Parks and Rec. It is one of the things they asked me to look at. So I've had a bunch of golfers, of people that I knew and people that they knew, come in. Everybody from essentially semi-pros to others that have actually run golf courses. And I want them to come in and evaluate it and go through. And it was glowing. None of these individuals have ever, they some of them heard of Atlanta's course, some of them did not. And they've come from, all over Illinois. But none of them have played it. And they ranked it right up there with some of the bigger communities and bigger courses, which, again, I'm not a golfer. I understand. I can play golf, but it's just not well. I can't play well, right?
Well, we would get along fine then.
Yeah, there you go. It's, what I do is I go out and I just create divots. But they came in and it was glowing. They were very, very impressed. And that speaks volumes, because some of these guys, they've played the big courses, Pebble Beach and Augusta or whatever, those type of courses. And I think that is another thing that Atlanta really has going for it. Again, the Atlanta community works very well together, and they have a lot of different entities and a lot of different interests. And when you have a small community like that with a really nice golf course that draws people in from all over central Illinois, it speaks volumes.
Do you have many people from the agricultural industry that want to come in and check on the Hawes elevator?
Yes, but a lot of people from outside of the community. It's just a bigger draw for that. And the new coal mine museum is a big draw. I get calls for people wanting to come in from all over the place, even out of state, wanting to come in and see the new coal mine museum. So again, really fascinating and unique assets for the Atlanta community.
How did you happen to find out about this nice little city of Atlanta, Scott?
Well, I've known about Atlanta forever, just being one county away.
Being a Pontiac guy.
And, have eaten here over the years, and I'm a 66-person roadie, so that's my business personally is Route 66 industry and tourism, and I do consulting and so forth for 66 communities. So I've been involved with it for years, but just keeping an eye on it and watching it and visiting here on my trips was how I've gotten to know Atlanta. And then when this opportunity came up, I was like, boy, yeah, I'd love to do it. It works with my schedule. It's a part-time gig, right? As a tourism director, I consult and work with people, already. I was already working with the director, previous to me a little bit, and helping with some graphic work and design and marketing. So this was a natural thing for me to roll right into.
You know what? I want to stay close to this guy because I may lose this job if I don't get around to doing something about our sponsors. Every Wednesday morning, the old man almost forgets his sponsors. Go right ahead, Jim. And we're right back with Viewpoint, your live show on WLCN, high on County Road 2250. Our guest this morning, very bright young man. I'm very happy to know him. First time I met Scott McCoy. He's a Pontiac resident, but he's a tourism director for the community of Atlanta. And up and down Route 66, we have a lot of fine communities, such as Atlanta. They don't offer all that Atlanta offers, so we're going to let Scott McCoy talk a little bit about that. Go right ahead, Scott.
Wow, you know, the glowing review that you give me, or introduction, is great. Lloyd, I appreciate it. That $20 did go very far.
All right. Do what I can.
That was a good heads up. So, yeah, Atlanta is one of those communities, like I said, that really has a lot of different entities involved in the community. The Betterment Fund, of course, the city, and the the business district and all the businesses, and they work very, very well together. And you have to do that in a smaller community, right?
Yeah.
So we have a new museum, which is what we really, I wanted to get to. It's the American Giants Museum. And everybody around here has now heard of it and that it's coming soon. It's still under construction, but we've been opening it. We've probably had 1,000 people through it already, and it's not even open. Opening it for just, tour groups or people stopping by. I drive through like this morning, there's people standing there looking in the window. They want to get in, they want to check it out.
Seriously?
Yeah, it is, because if you're on 66, now there's obviously local people. I had a call the other day from somebody that drove here specifically from, I want to say it was the Champaign area, I believe, but wanted to come over and specifically just try to get a preview of it and see what it is. And this museum is a collaboration between the Betterment Fund, the City of Atlanta, and Joel Baker. And Joel Baker is a gentleman who's been collecting these giants. We talked about the Bunyan Giant. He's been collecting these fiberglass roadside attractions for years. He just fell in love with them, thought they were great, and he does restoration work and now has a business in restoring these giants and different artifacts. So he's had this warehouse full of these giants and giant pieces. It got lined up a trip to Atlanta as part of his kind of go around America and see all these different statues, and met a gentleman in Atlanta, Bill Thomas, who is with the Betterment Fund as well, and really the first tourism person. It wasn't really an official title, but Bill took it on because that's the kind of guy he is. He loves Route 66.
He just gets involved.
He gets involved, and he came over and struck up a conversation, and they struck up a friendship. Well, over the years, it just came to be that, hey, if you've got all these things, if we built you a little museum, would you put them here? And that was obviously sparked a lot of interest with Joel. If you've got these things and you love them, you don't want them sitting in a warehouse or a barn or whatever. He's trying to save them. You save them for people to enjoy them. And that is really how the museum started, through those three entities. And what a lot of people may not realize is Route 66 has several different types of attractions that are out there. So you have the history and the historic attractions, the old 26 pieces of pavement that are still out there from original Route 66, and the old buildings and the old communities and whatever, roundhouses and so forth. But some of the newer attractions that came out of the 50s and 60s and even the 70s were these roadside fiberglass attractions. And it became a staple of Route 66. There's several on Route 66 all the way through. And of course, Atlanta has the Bunyan Giant, which came from Cicero, like I mentioned, and now sits on Route 66.
Oh.
So we've decided as Atlanta, as a community, that this is something we want to really highlight, and all of Joel's pieces, or a lot of his pieces, are going to come to Atlanta. We already have a new one, so we have two giants now, and that's what's called a snurd. He's kind of a nerdy looking Alfred E. Newman Mad Magazine type of a guy right behind the museum, and he's one of these very unique figures. This museum will, for Route 66, will make Atlanta probably one of the top 10 to 15 spots on the entire route. And I can't tell you the number of communities up and down the route that I consult with and talk to and work with and so forth, and businesses and all and the like, who are just like, how in the world did you get something like this? And it is, it's hard to fathom what this is going to do for Atlanta and Logan County and central Illinois. But like I said, we're not even open. It is pretty much if you call for a tour group or call ahead or happen to catch me there, excuse me, that we'll open it for you. And we probably had 1,000 people go through it already.
6. That's all right. I get all choked
Oh,
up.
gosh,
I get
yeah.
all choked up in my job too, so it's all right.
Yeah, it is just such an emotional thing for me. Okay, yeah.
648-5510. Our guest this morning, Mr. Scott McCoy. He's Atlanta's new tourism director, and that's a big thing for a small community like Atlanta to have a tourism director. And certainly there's a lot of interesting things around there. It kind of beats my hometown of Burtonview. So in any event, if you have some questions or concoct a question or two to call for Mr. Scott McCoy, 648-5510. Find out something about what's going on up here. By the way, you mentioned coal mines. Here I am about to phase out forever. And I don't think I ever realized that we have a coal mine up here in Atlanta.
Yes, we do.
I never remembered that.
Yeah, so Central Illinois, obviously, back in the day, even before your day, right? Which was just a couple years ago. Coal mines were a thing.
Don't be lying on the air.
It was just one of those things, and even in Pontiac, we had a lot of coal mines.
Well, I was
in the
aware
area,
of that
but-
up in Pontiac and all.
Yeah.
But I never knew that we had right up the road from Lincoln, Illinois. We had coal mines, and then the outcroppings. I remember the shale. What we just called it the shale pile, which is just north of Lincoln.
Exactly.
And I was forbidden to climb it because I was just a runt, and you climbed it anyway. And what I remember about that is the days before the defoliation started with our tree disease, and you could look out from the top of that shale pile, and all over Lincoln, all you could see was a canopy of green. Not so now. That's just the way it is.
Yep.
But I'd forgotten, Scott, that you had a coal mine operating out of Atlanta, Illinois.
Well, it was sort of operating. So the story goes that there's known coal there, so they were trying to get down to it, and they built this coal mine, dug it down. It had a staircase, and the whole shot. It's really deep. It was known to be here, and they put a building over top of it, which was used by the city of Atlanta for decades. And there ended up becoming a hole in the floor or something, and they went, oh yeah, the coal mine, we know it's there. Why don't we just turn this into a museum? We'll open that up and see, let's explore it at first. So they cut the flooring out in the basement and looked down there, and what? Just, it's
Sure
all
enough.
still intact. Nothing's caved in. There's no. They sent a gentleman down there to explore it, took water samples, took a couple of the staircases that obviously had rotted away and went down, fell down and were floating in the water, and decided to make a museum out of it. So coal was never discovered because they hit the water table. But then it became the source for Atlanta's water, which is why the water tower is located, in the plant, real close to it. So because they couldn't get through the water and pump it out and that sort of thing to get down deeper to where they expected the coal, it never really yielded anything there. But now it's a museum, and they've built the museum to where there's it's covered up, it's plexiglass. There's a whole museum built around it, and the kids, we have a grandson that's about 5 years old, and he just sits there and looks down and just mesmerized. He loves the snurd and the giants. He thought all those were really cool, but he wants to go to that coal mine and look down that shaft.
I went down to coal mine one time when they opened up the new Boyce mine before out west of Lincoln, and I said I'd never be a miner. Boy, and this was kind of crude as opposed to today's equipment and so forth. But I went about 10 feet down that shaft, and I said, that's all for me, and I came back. Now, tell us, Scott, in relationship to the lovely library, which is truly, and I don't mean that facetiously, that's a lovely library here you have in Atlanta. Where is this museum in relationship to where the library is?
Okay, so the Coal Mine Museum itself is located what we're kind of considering now the museum complex, which is next to the historic grain elevator, the wooden grain elevator, which of course everybody in the area is very familiar with. Then there's also the carriage house there. So with those three pieces on the one property, it's kind of become our complex. The Museum for the Giants, the American Giants Museum, is located just off Arch Street in the downtown area, or that block between Race and Vine, which of course sets right on Route 66.
Now, you've mentioned before about tour groups and you opening the museum for folks. They happen to call you or whatever. Is there an official opening date on the books yet, or are things still kind of falling into place for that?
Right. For the coal mine and all of those, they are opened every day, just automatic. You can just walk in and check them out. But for the American Giants Museum, there is no opening date yet. Construction delays and so forth to put that, you can imagine with construction after COVID, everything's busy. We're hoping to have it sometime in August, kind of an official opening, but it just really kind of depends, and we're playing it by ear right now.
With your studying the history of your new community, Scott, were you aware of the fact that Logan County had a fair up here in Atlanta way back in the old days, as they talk about? In 1937, I believe, they reopened the Logan County Fair as we now know it. And the old boys that did that at that time were very bright. They set their opening date just a week ahead of the state fair. And, of course, that brought a lot of good distributors and so forth into the Logan County Fair. But long before that, they had a fair up here in Logan County in Atlanta, and I understand it was quite an operation.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah. Well, now, okay, you left here with something to know, so the morning isn't wasted.
And that makes up for the fact of coming in the studio and seeing all these Cardinals things hanging around.
Well, it's pretty hard
Wow.
for a man who was born a Cub fan. It's pretty hard to sit here every Wednesday morning, but it's a fact of life.
Wow. It's I almost walked back out, but I figured, well,
Last place.
there's always next year. That's the phrase. Get used to it. I'm very used to it as a Cubs fan. Yeah. So.
What is your next big project, if there is a quote big project on the calendar, Scott?
Well, for Atlanta, it's obviously the Giants Museum. A lot of marketing, a lot of promotion, and that sort of thing. It's already ramping up, so we're pushing it a little bit, but it's just that construction project. So it's really kind of a lot of catch up right now for me, and a lot of trying to make do with what we've got. But that's just a fact of life when you're building something new, and it's it leaks out, and everybody wants to see it. So, like I said, you go by there about any time of day, and there's somebody trying to get in or looking in the windows and try to take pictures through the windows.
Lloyd and listeners, Mr. McCoy's digging from the bottom of a deep hole, and I don't mean that in any smart way at all. Who's heard of Atlanta, Illinois? Nationwide, coast to coast, on Route 66, now 55, of course. So you have a big job. You can't justify your job by just drawing them from south of Elkhart. You've got to go a little further than that. So this is a major assignment to create tourism in a small community such as it is, and they proliferate up and down the old 55 or old 66. There are all kinds of communities like Atlanta.
Right. And it is a big job, but again, the Route 66 tourism is what gives Atlanta a big leg up, because these travelers are coming here to see Americana. Let's just forget about the U.S. travel. There's obviously a lot of that as well in road trips in 66. But everywhere else in the world, when they think of America, they're going to think of two different things. One is it pops in their head of like New York, right?
Yeah.
That's just kind of generally what they think of as a big city, America. And then they think of Americana and the old farm towns and rural communities and the history of it, and that is Route 66 is what comes to mind. That plays to the advantage of everybody on Route 66, and Atlanta has that ability to pull that. So these people are already here. They're already going. Now, they may go by on 55, depending on their schedule or whether or not they're aware of Atlanta. So my job is to capture those people. There are hundreds of thousands of people every season driving through Atlanta one way or the other, whether they stop, whether they just kind of do a general bypass, because there's 2 alignments of Route 66 through here, or they take the interstate and they just essentially bypass it. That's my job, is to pull those people off. We don't have to draw them from like, oh, where am I going to go on vacation? They're already doing that. We have to get them to stop here, and what I call is get their keister out of the car and see something. Once they're here, they spend money, and that's the other side of the coin with tourism, is the economic side of it and economic development. So because of that, and just because of this museum alone, Atlanta already is seeing a draw in economic activity. We have multiple businesses that are looking. We have a gentleman this week that's a business owner who is familiar with Atlanta, knows where Atlanta was, but didn't really understand anything that was going on with it. And that museum's draw, and that now I'm showing him the numbers of people that are stopping here on 66 and the potential of new numbers that are already traveling. He's looking to put a business in Atlanta, brand new business, and purchase actually multiple buildings. We were just talking to somebody who's not from the area, the immediate area, and they were looking at another building that's for sale and a possible brewery. So there's all kinds of things, and that came out. We didn't seek that. I mean, it was just kind of got talking. And they're like, wow, this is really interesting, and with all these people stopping. That's what my job really is to have dollars dropped in Atlanta. And the draw is the tourism draw. You get people here, they stop, they buy gas, they purchase a hat or whatever. So interesting story. We had a tour bus that came in, probably 40 some people, all on one bus. So I, as a tourism director, I meet them, we talk to them, we show them around, point them to the stores and so forth. Well, the retail shops that we had did not have Route 66 hats in stock. And this couple really wanted a 66 hat. This is the beginning of their trip. They started in Chicago, which 80% of them do, and head out west. And she jumps off the bus at the end, getting ready to leave. I'm standing there talking with the bus director, tourism director, and she looks at me and she says, "Excuse me, my husband loves your 66 hat." And I said, "Well, thank you." And she's like, "Can I buy it from you?" I'm like, "Ma'am, this hat's 5 years old and full of sweat. You don't want this hat." She's like, No. We want a picture of you in the hat, and I'll give you $25 for that hat.
Seriously?
It was a nice hat. Don't get me wrong, but I spent maybe $10, $15 5 years ago on this hat.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Ma'am, there's places up and down." And the tourism director on the bus was like, "Ma'am, we're going to stop at tons of places. There's hats all up." "No, we want it. We want it from here, and we want a picture of you wearing it so we know where it came from," whatever. And I said, "Okay, fine. I kind of felt a little guilty about it, but I was like, okay, okay." So, and I sold it, and he put it right on his head, sweat and all. But these people want to spend money. And when they couldn't spend money just because the item wasn't available in Atlanta, and they're on their trip, and it's the beginning, this was only their third stop out of Chicago, boom, they're spending money, and they bought it right off my head. So we're going to take advantage of that, and we are working with businesses who are understanding that, who are coming to Atlanta and saying, wow, people are stopping here. So we've got that one side of the coin. Now we're building up that second side, which is selling them something and getting them to drop down.
648-5510. This is your chance to talk to the real McCoy.
Hey, that's good. I've never heard that.
Oh, well, I'm just more a pretty face, No, seriously, to our two listeners out there, this is a chance to, I'm sitting here really enjoying. I know a little bit about Atlanta, having been around a couple of years, but I'm enjoying this, hearing things that I didn't really know about Atlanta. So, Mr. Kirby, if you have anything you want to jump in there, well, you just push me aside, and I'll be glad to shut up.
I don't know if I'll push you. You'll probably push me back. But hopping back to the Giants Museum, once it is ready to be opened, is there like a certain number of Giants that you'll have there as sort of a permanent display, or will you kind of, I'm not sure what the gentleman has in terms of inventory, will there be like rotating displays, or how will that work?
Yes, so it'll very good question. First of all, inside the museum, so there's an inside and an outside, right? So inside the museum, it's not a huge complex. It's built to look like and it's all brand new construction, but it looks like a 1960s Texaco gas station. Because there is a restored Texaco historic sign that is already there. And then on the other corner will be what's called the Texaco Big Friend, which is a giant. And there are only 6 of those in existence today.
Oh, wow.
And there are, I don't know, 300 of them made or something like that. So there's only 6 of them that have survived, that are known, and anybody has any inkling that are out there. We will have one of them, and it's fully restored. That alone is going to be just a massive draw. So that's why it was built this way. But inside, the artifacts will be, there's what's called a professional series piece, which is not huge. It's about 8 foot tall. But it's more like for doctors and dentists. That is a very, very rare piece. The A&W pieces that are in there. The SO Tiger, put a tiger in your tank, if you remember those back in the day. So we have one of those. And those will rotate, just because we can't put everything in there, obviously. And we want to keep it changing and so forth. Behind, or kind of on the side of the museum complex, the Snurd stands there now in the center, and to each of his flanks will be 2 more giants. There'll be 5 right next to each other, and which makes 6 with the Big Friend on the property. On display, just those 5 will be a world record. Actually, I think 2 in the same spot would be a world record, just checking that, but 5 and then 6 on the same property, and 7 all within half a block with the Bunyan statue. So that will be an incredible sight when it's done. It'll take a couple years for all 5 to arrive. They are still being restored, and then they have to be shipped here and erected and so forth. There'll be a beautiful seating area around it with flowers and all kinds of things. Of course, gas pumps in front of the station, and it's all designed to basically be photo ops. So yeah, a lot of really cool stuff.
You know what? Go ahead, sir.
I was just going to ask, as far as erecting those statues and putting them in place, I'm guessing there's probably a lot of behind-the-scenes work you have to do in terms of a certain foundation or certain things to make sure they withstand the weather and things like that as well.
Absolutely, and it's interesting. I was just having a conversation with Joel Baker. Tulsa had all those storms go through, and he built a replica giant for a Route 66 attraction in Tulsa. So it's a newer thing, but he was always concerned with high winds. If they're not protected somehow or whatever, they're going to go over. So Tulsa had those high winds. They had up to 100-mile-an-hour gusts and basically tornadic activity. And the new piece survived, and it has the same superstructure. So a lot of these, there's 2 parts to these fiberglass giants, and typically considered muffler men. There's the outside fiberglass part, which is essentially just a shell, and it hangs on a superstructure. Well, when he rebuilds them and restores them, they beef up the infrastructure on the inside of the superstructure, including the mounts on the feet. So that survived there in 100-mile-an-hour winds, and we're a little more exposed than they are there in Tulsa. But we don't see them really having any problem as long as they have a good base. But they have a massively thick, heavy concrete base that we pour, and then there's even kind of a augured out, center there that you don't even see. So they aren't going to go anywhere. And I told Joel, I said, knowing a little bit about construction, they're kind of rounded figures. They're not like a big sail or a billboard or something to catch the wind. The wind's not really ever going to be a problem with these guys. It's not that the wind's blowing, it's what the wind's blowing. So if somebody else's shed comes off and hits it, that might be a problem. But it was one of those things you take into account. There's obviously a lot of money involved with that, in making sure that it's a secured structure.
648-5510. Our guest this morning, Mr. Scott McCoy. He is the real McCoy, folks. Did you ever figure out what the real McCoy is, Scott?
Yes.
That has to be lurking in your background somewhere.
It is, and but my favorite cartoon actually was The Far Side with the fake McCoys.
They were funny, yeah.
They were all like cardboard cutouts, right? So kind of like the Giants Museum, right? All these different cutouts and different giants along the side of the road. Yes, I've my family, I'm told, actually goes back to the Hatfields and McCoys way back in the day with those feuds, which explains a lot of my marriage with my wife.
A lot of shooting going on then.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, and she wins every time.
Yeah.
So after 30 years, I realized that I just got to let her go. Okay, that and let her run things, and it goes a lot smoother that way. I'm a lot happier that way when she's happy. So
Well, of course, the subject this morning is tourism, and more specifically, tourism for in and around Atlanta. I alluded to looking at the register many years back in a nice little restaurant we had up here on Main Street, and how many I was just couldn't believe how many European visitors there were here to out touring the country, finding Atlanta, Illinois somehow, and I thought that was quite interesting. And that's before we'd had a barn burner like Scott McCoy.
It's true. The foreign travelers, when we tried to track them, these guest books that you'll find in a lot of stores and so forth, they're a decent indicator. They don't work real great because not everybody signs it. You don't know how many there are. A lot of times they won't tell you where they're from or they don't mark it. So we're getting better. I'm actually going to implement some new technology in Atlanta to kind of spearhead that and get better data. I'm a data guy. I like the good data. But we're going to figure out where everybody's coming from. But really the big ones are France is huge. I mean, it's amazing. A lot of Polish travelers. It is really, really popular over there and promoted. And Australia. Australia is probably number one, I think, of the visitors that I've seen over the years. I've been involved with this over 18 years now with Route 66 specifically. And they have a lot of tour groups and companies in Australia and New Zealand that come over here specifically just to do Route 66. That's their whole business. It is amazing. And if I can throw this out real quick on the air, for anybody locally who would like to get involved and learn more about Atlanta and the tourism, and if you're interested even in volunteering, because we are packed. I mean, we could use a lot of volunteers. They can go to our website. It's a brand new website. It's AtlantaIllinoisTourism.com. Illinois is all spelled out. AtlantaIllinoisTourism.com, and they can learn about all these attractions, different things that we have coming up. When a new giant arrives, we'll let them know because, like I said, that over the next few years, those will be all being installed. And if they'd like to volunteer or become part of it, if they're from the Atlanta community or the county, we'd love to have them.
So as far as marketing, you mentioned trying to get those people as they're passing by on the highway, trying to get them to stop to Atlanta. Do you do anything in terms of trying to get the word out locally? I mean, other than coming to the powerhouse that is WLCN, is there a concerted effort to increase awareness among Atlanta, among Logan County and so forth?
Yeah, great question, and absolutely. So there are two different types of tourism in general. You have the regional, and then you have the outside or non-regional. When somebody comes to Atlanta and they drop dollars, that's paying for other things, right? So we can fill potholes and it helps the community. It's not a regional draw. The local and regional draw, we are promoting and pushing for that, and that's wonderful. We'd love those people to come in, and they are more repeat. So they'll come in to the Country Air or Chubby's or and eat or get gas and those type of things, or come in and visit and enjoy the golf course, and they'll be a repeat. That is a huge asset for Atlanta and for the county, and in Central Illinois for that matter. But then there's the focus of those other people, which are basically one-offs. So they'll come in. There is repeat roadies on Route 66 too. There's a lot of people that do it every year. I travel the entire Route 66 twice a year. That's just part of my job. Yeah. So it's a lot of driving. Yeah. It's just kind of part of the deal. So there are people that are repeats, but for the most part, it's a once in a lifetime type of trip or a bucket list type of thing. So they'll come over and they want to experience it big time, and they do spend money. And some people spend 2 months traveling Route 66. I do it in about 14, 15 days, depending.
Boy.
But
Well, we're infringing upon somebody else's time this morning, but one final question, Scott. If somebody has any comment or input, how would they contact Scott McCoy?
They can visit the website for any good comments at AtlantaIllinoisTourism.com. If you have any bad comments, I'm not going to tell you where to send those.
just send Jim Ash, County Road 2250. Scott McCoy has been with us, Atlanta Tourism Director. We appreciate very much sharing your knowledge and your enthusiasm. Good luck to you on that. Atlanta is one of the great little communities we have here in Logan County. So thank you for Viewpoint.
The preceding program is a presentation of WLCN 96.3 FM and WLCNonline.com.